Welcome to Board Certified, expert interviews on medical licensing exams and healthcare careers. I'm Cassandra from Achievable, and Achievable offers adaptive online prep for exams like the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, MPTE, and CSCS, all built to give you a complete study system in one place. Each course combines clear explanations, targeted practice questions that adapt to you, and full-length practice exams designed to reflect the real test. You can try any Achievable course free at achievable.me and use the code podcast to save 10%. Now let's get started. So today we have Laurel Poole with us, and Laurel, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name's Laurel Poole. I'm the Director of Admissions for the University of Central Florida's College of Medicine MD program. I've been with the admissions office there for nearly 12 years now, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk a little bit with Cassandra about personal statements as they relate to applying to medical school.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, like you said, we're talking personal statements for med school. And to start things off, what makes the personal statement so important as part of the medical school application, and how does it differ than the other elements in the application? A lot of times the personal statement shouldn't just be regurgitating your metrics, right? So can you talk about the importance of it and what the admissions committees hope to learn about an applicant?
Yeah, so the personal statement plays a huge role in the over evaluation of the application because that is really the only place where you get to talk in your own voice about your motivations for medicine, maybe things that influenced your decision. This is where I say this is where you talk the talk. Your activities show if you've walked the walk. So people can write all they want about how much they care about taking care of people, volunteering, and then we are going to look at your activities and say, did they actually do the things they said that they care so much about in their personal statement? And it also gives us some background or an opportunity for you to give us some background into maybe some things that have impacted your journey to medicine. So it's really the only place where you have your voice in the application, and it's really important that you use that space to help us to better understand you and why you want to be a doctor.
Absolutely. And I think it is so important. How should students begin identifying meaningful experiences to include in that essay? And how do they go about choosing what's relevant or what's not? Should their experiences be related to healthcare, or does it just have to demonstrate part of their character?
I think it can be a combination of the both. Some people have those aha moments and they can really capture them in writing. Some people, maybe it really wasn't that significant. It's just maybe you love science, you've had clinical experiences, and you've just really can see yourself doing that as a career. So people shouldn't feel like they have to have this dramatic story to capture in their personal statement. I know that can be very overwhelming for students when they feel like I don't have anything unique or dramatic to talk about and I'm not going to capture the reader. Most people don't, realistically. Most people have just a normal kind of path. It is important that you start identifying sort of the themes and to hone in on maybe one or two. What some students end up doing is they try to highlight every medical crisis they've ever experienced in their life. So they end up with eight short paragraphs of every traumatic medical experience. And it really doesn't tell us anything about them other than these traumatic experiences. There's no real reflection in it. So maybe pick one or two things that really were impactful. Maybe they have some kind of a theme that you can tie together and go with that. Maybe there are a lot of things you could talk about, but I don't recommend getting into every single thing that's ever happened to you and why that led you to medicine. It's too much and it doesn't make for a cohesive essay.
Right. Yeah, and there is like a little bit of creativity that goes into it. Like you mentioned, having a theme to tie everything together, important too. And it doesn't like you don't have to be writing a novel, but I think it helps to engage the reader because these admissions committees are reading a ton of these essays. So I think that really helps to stand out as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then Are there any like specific experiences that do tend to resonate most with the readers that maybe it's unique or maybe it's just the style of writing? Is there anything like that that
I usually tell students this is not a creative writing exercise, so don't it doesn't need to be a screenplay. You don't have to
Mhm.
doesn't have this like blockbuster beginning because sometimes people overdo it in that direction. I think trying to capture your character, maybe a story that really showcases when you've shown some resilience or a character building experience. I think those are good because being a physician requires a lot of resilience. Getting through medical school requires a lot of resilience. Being able to recognize that you need help with something or when you're wrong about something and you need to seek someone else's advice. I think it's really good when you can show your maturity through your writing. And even if the experience isn't like you've done everything right and made every decision correct or everything's been smooth sailing, showing how you figured it out is important because we need students who medical school is hard. Almost every single person is going to struggle at some point, and we want people who have the ability to be resilient, to pick themselves up when it's difficult and recorrect and move forward. So I think if you have situations, which most people have those situations where things didn't go their way and they figured it out, they didn't make excuses or blame anybody else, then those are good things to highlight in a personal statement.
yeah, absolutely. And then would you say it's important to have a strong opening paragraph that can really hook the reader, or does that kind of fall into the creative writing avenue that is don't overthink it?
Yeah, I wouldn't overthink it really. Obviously, like you said, we read a lot of them and it can get very mundane, reading basically the same thing over and over again. And some people, the story gets better as we keep reading, and some
Mhm.
people are really good writers. You're not always going to find that perfect combination of someone who's great at science and also just happens to be a great writer at the same time. But there are those students. I would definitely caution you to not be overutilizing AI. A lot of schools are screening for that now. So,
Mhm.
don't just rely on artificial intelligence to write you this outstanding opener because you would be surprised how many times it will populate the same thing. And even a couple years ago, we would see emails that we could tell, like they said the same thing from people from different
Yep.
parts of the country. So you really want to be careful. Be authentic. I'd rather read a more average, authentic personal statement than something I can tell you did not write.
Yeah, 100%. Especially now, like it's becoming easier to spot that and like the same exact thing all the time. So just be really cautious about that. And then obviously AI, but are there any other cliches that you see fairly often? And then how do you recommend that students avoid that?
One thing that sometimes students write that I see our admissions, our faculty not loving is saying things like, I was born to be a doctor. I wouldn't include things like that. Most people, nobody was born to be a doctor. Maybe that's how it ends up, but it just sounds a little cliche to include things like that. I'm trying to think. Avoiding things like overinflating your role maybe in a crisis situation. I've seen that, or maybe students work in a clinical setting. There was a crisis situation, and the way they describe the situation makes it sound like they were the doctor. You always want to keep in mind who is reading my application: doctors and teachers, professors. So you never want to be criticizing doctors or people who teach because that's who's reading. They know, and maybe in your scenario, you really did do more than the average medical assistant or EMT, but it's better to downplay and be modest in your application than to be like the hero in this scenario, like nobody else was involved, because they're going to err on the side of this is not true, this is exaggerated, and that doesn't generally land well. So being, it's hard in an application because you want to brag because you're trying to say this is how great I am, please pick me, but also be humble at the same time.
Mhm.
So that's why it's super important to have other people read what you write, because the way you might think it's coming across could be very different than a reader is going to. And I've seen multiple people read the same personal statement and take it very different ways. Having a lot of sets of eyes interpret how your tone is, like what you're taking credit for. You don't want to come in guns a-blazing like, I've experienced these negative things in healthcare and I'm going to change everything. I'm going to be the best doctor that there
Right.
ever was. That stuff is best avoided because, again, who's reading this? Those very people you're talking about. So I just suggest, again, err on the side of modest and humble, and you're usually in a better place.
Yeah, that's a great segue too to what I want to ask next, which is who should be reviewing your personal statement and who maybe should not be, you should not be going to them for advice on that.
So, if you have a writing center at your school, definitely utilize the people who know at least the technical stuff and can fix grammatical errors, maybe catch some mistakes on like that side of things. If you have a mentor or somebody who's worked with a lot of students who've applied to medical school, I would suggest using people like that. Your pre-health advising office, they see these things every year after year. They see what lands, what doesn't land, like who's getting into medical school, who's not, and they will hopefully give you honest feedback. I usually would not suggest having your classmates. Chances are your peers are not going to give you true feedback because it's awkward. People that really have nothing to lose by telling you the truth, those are the people I would stick with. Maybe your parents are super honest and they tell you, but I would veer away from family and friends and stick with the people that see how this thing works every year. So, pre health advisors, faculty who maybe write a letter of recommendation or they advise students, and your writing center. Stick with those people.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then are there any signs or signals that, your personal statement is ready to submit?
At some point, you have to know when to quit, and
Yeah.
you hopefully will know when you get to that point. Even in medical school, like I hear our the people that help our students, like tutoring, things like that. Like students, especially this type A type that likes to go to medical school, sometimes they don't know when to quit. Like eventually, you just gotta stop studying. You can't just study up till the last to the test because you're really not learning anything new in those last few
Mm,
hours. So once you've written it, you've revised it, you've looked at it many times, as I'm sure most students will. You've had a few other people review it. It's probably good to go. I don't think it's something you need to spend years on. Maybe you have some ideas, and if you're someone who likes to write, maybe you just keep jotting down ideas like of things you think might be good things to talk about. But eventually, you just have to look at it and be satisfied with what you got.
yeah, I think that can be an easy trap too, to just constantly be revising or, oh, let me add this paragraph, let me add this experience. At a certain point, you're really just going to drive yourself crazy. So just, I
Right.
think if you have people who are qualified and know, what they're looking for and know you pretty well, I think that's going to be your best bet in getting that feedback and incorporating it.
Yeah, because some students are like, that was a good point. Like people that know you, some people are very too modest and they
Mm-hmm.
don't include things that are really would be important or would really capture the reader. So, yeah, people that know you, but who will be honest with you, who are like, why didn't you
Right.
mention this thing? That would really impress them. Because some students, yeah, they are too modest and too humble, and we're learning all these outstanding things about them through letters of recommendation that they didn't mention themselves in their application. So, that's a great point.
Yeah. It really is a fine line. Like you want to be humble but not too modest, and you
Yeah.
want to be proud but not too boastful. So fine
Mhm.
line there, and it just helps getting different sets of eyes on that to really help you find that line. And then do you have any advice for applicants who feel like their experiences aren't good enough? That might come into those who are too modest and think, oh, that's not really that important or it's not relevant, or they're just constantly comparing to other people.
Yeah, I know that is a very common thing among pre-meds. There are zillions of you, and you're all checking Reddit and SDN and talking to your classmates, and everybody thinks either their stuff's way better than everybody else's or they're way behind everybody else. But I've met with students who didn't apply because they thought their application materials weren't strong enough, and they were great. They were fine. They could have applied, but they're just worrying too much about what everyone else is doing. Listen to what, the professionals are telling you. If the admissions offices are telling you, we want you to do this, If you have other mentors or outlets that you use for advising, listen to those people. Don't worry about what your classmates are doing. And also keep in mind, most admissions offices are using a holistic review. So, your life may be very different than somebody else's life. You may be somebody who's working full time and another person's not working at all. So their application is going to look different. It doesn't necessarily mean that theirs is going to be accepted over yours, because we are going to take into consideration the life of the applicant. I tell students this every year. If I lined up all 120 of our applications, of our matriculants, they all look different. There is no one way to be a good applicant to medical school. There's generally the things you need to do, but if I knew like the secret sauce to be guaranteed admission to medical school, I could just quit my job today and sell that, because everybody wants to know. And there is no secret sauce. There's so many ways that applicants present strong applications. So all you can do is the best you can do with your circumstances and the time that you have. Make the most of that time doing the things, because it is a grind. Like, this is not going to be a time where you can just be like, I need me time, because quite frankly, you're not going to a career path where me time is valued because your job is to take care of other people on their time. So if that is that important to you, again, that's why you want to make sure this is the career for you. It's important that you recognize this is a grind, and you're going to have to commit pretty much all of your time to getting all the things you need to get for your application. But we will look at you as a human and say, okay, this is the time they had. Did they make the most of the time that they had to dedicate to this process?
Yeah. And I like what you said about use your individuality. Like, everyone is unique and it takes all kinds. And I think that's also going to what we said about checking boxes. That's really not going to set you up for success, because I think you're trying to fit into this mold. And the thing is, there really isn't a mold. And so you
No.
really have to trust and believe in yourself and be very passionate about it, and know that like you can do it, because like you said, this is not an easy thing. Not everyone
No.
can be a doctor. So you really have to find it in yourself and know that your uniqueness and individuality is really part of what is going to get you there.
Right.
Great. Is there anything else that you think we missed that you want to touch on?
I guess the only other thing I would mention, just to piggyback off of this, because the two things, what we've talked about is the stuff outside of academics, and that uniqueness is super important. But always keep in mind, like, the academics, that is going to play a big role. And I tell students, you can't volunteer your way out of a bad GPA. You
Mhm.
can't you can be Mother Teresa, but if we don't see that you can do the work, we're not doing any favors for applicants if we accept them to medical school and they can't get through. All the extra stuff is super important, but you want to make sure that academic profile is showing that you can do the work. It doesn't mean you have to have a perfect MCAT or a perfect GPA, because you don't. We have people with all kinds of GPAs, test scores. But if you look at the ranges for the medical schools you want to apply to, that gives you an idea of who they have seen be successful in their curriculum. Make sure you do keep that in mind when you're applying to medical school and checking which schools you think you want to apply for.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like, at the end of the day, it does all matter. Is holistic review and everything's taken into account. That is why you really want to be focused and really plan out everything well in advance so that you.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much. This was great advice.
You're welcome.
This has been Board Certified, hosted by Cassandra from Achievable with Laurel Poole. And Achievable has great online courses for the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, MPTE, CSCS, and others. And you can try them out for free at achievable.me.